All right. Thank you so much again for staying with us. Now, it's World Hypertension Day, and it's just apt because the day helps, to talk about promoting increased awareness of high blood pressure and accuracy in blood pressure measurement, especially in low to middle income areas. Raised blood pressure is the biggest single contributing risk factor to global health. So, we have with us here someone who knows what to talk about. Dr. Oyewale Kushimo is a consultant cardiologist, Lagos University Teaching Hospital. He's also coordinator in Lagos for the Nigerian Hypertension Society. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Perhaps we might begin with some maybe illusions that people have about hypertension, some misconceptions about, blood pressure and all of that you're aware of.
Okay. Well, first of all, some people feel that blood pressure is something that is there's a lot of denial. First of all, it's a bit difficult for people to first of all accept that they're hypertensive. A lot of times, when they get a blood pressure reading, they usually attribute it to, okay, I was stressed, I didn't sleep well, I didn't, I'm going through some challenges. So there's often that a lot of denial. They feel, look, it's not my reading, And there was even a patient of mine that, challenged me once, and when I got the blood pressure, I said, no, that it's not mine, that, she has already been to church, they've prayed for her, that this blood pressure, this reading is not my own, it doesn't belong to me. So that's one thing, even though to be a word of caution is that also for blood pressure, for hypertension is actually persistent elevation of blood pressure. So it's true, sometimes you could have just a transient spike, that's why we usually confirm the diagnosis with repeated measurements to be sure it's persistent. But even in spite of that, some people, it's a bit difficult for some people to accept, and that's one. And then also, of course, one thing is that a blood pressure in itself is a norm. It's everybody has a blood pressure. That's another misconception. They think BP is a disease. No, blood pressure is not a disease. Hypertension is a disease when that blood pressure is persistently elevated. So everybody has a blood pressure, and we expect that blood pressure to be, is when it's more than 140/90 persistently, then it becomes hypertension. Though ideally we want it to be around 120/130, but when it's persistently above 140, then it becomes a problem. So that's another misconception. Some people think blood pressure is abnormality. No, blood pressure is, everybody needs a blood pressure. Everybody has a blood pressure. But it's when it's persistently elevated, then it becomes a problem. So I think that's one thing that I want to, disabuse people's minds of. And also another issue is, well, of course, blood pressure is something that is, it's a silent condition. That's also another misconception. Many people attribute their symptoms to blood pressure. They have back pain, they have headache, they check their blood pressure, it's high, then they think it's the blood pressure that's causing it. So that's another issue. For the vast majority of people, hypertension is asymptomatic. That's why oftentimes it's called the silent killer, because it can start causing damage for years, silently, without causing symptoms, and then people start having manifestations of the complications of hypertension. Well, high blood pressure on it, so for most people, of course, it can be very, very elevated. It can cause some symptoms, yes, when it becomes an emergency. Like you can get readings of 250 over 140, for instance, and in some people, they can have symptoms. But for most people that have high blood pressure, it's actually asymptomatic. And so one misconception is a lot of people attribute all kinds of symptoms to high blood pressure. So oftentimes when we want to check your blood pressure, we prefer checking your blood pressure when you're calm, when you're relaxed, when you're not under any distress, not when you just come back from the market, not when I'm not feeling well. Okay, there's always that instinct to check blood pressure when I'm not feeling well. Let me check my blood pressure. A lot of times that blood pressure may be elevated because of that distress that you're going through. So the blood pressure that we are very interested in is the calm blood pressure. You should check your blood pressure routinely, not because I'm feeling unwell, but because I want to know my readings, because blood pressure does not cause symptoms. So, but a lot of times we check their blood pressures when they have problems, and oftentimes that also leads to problems with diagnosis. So blood pressure checks something that should be routine, not when you're sick. It's actually when you're well, when you're calm. That is even the blood pressure we're interested in, not the blood pressure when I'm sweating, when I've just done exercise, when somebody has given me bad news. Oh, and I'm feeling, my team has lost. I'm watching my team has lost a football match, and then I'm going to check my blood pressure. Those readings are not representative of, so those are some misconceptions people mistakes people make.
You said something the other time that, blood pressure, elevated blood pressure, consistent elevated blood pressure causes damage silently.
Yeah.
What kind of damage?
Okay. So it causes damage to various organs, in the body, and maybe I can go from top to bottom. Of course, starting from the head, it's one of the most important risk factors in our environment for stroke. Oh. It can lead to stroke, and then going further down, it can also affect the eyes. Even within the brain, over time, it can also increase your risk of having dementia in some people. Cognitive impairment, so dementia over time. People having memory loss and all that. And then also going to the chest, the heart, it can lead to a heart attack. It can one of the risk factors for having a heart attack. And also over time, it can cause the heart to start thickening, because once the blood pressure is high, it puts more strain on the heart muscles. The heart muscles begin to thicken, and then over time, that can lead to a condition called heart failure, where the heart is not pumping. The heart is a pump, so the heart stops to do the work it's meant to do. That is to pump blood to other parts of the body, and then that function become compromised because of that affectation of the gradual damage of the heart muscle due to hypertension, which is called hypertensive heart disease. It can take years to develop, and over time it can lead to a condition where the heart is not pumping well, and then the person starts having swollen legs, swollen tummy, getting out of breath and all that. And then going further down, it can also affect the kidneys, and hypertension is one of the common major causes of renal failure, kidney failure, in our environment, together with diabetes, and hypertension is very important.
How does that happen, really?
Well, because, so the blood pressure, when the blood pressure is not well controlled, when it's persistently elevated, not well treated, so that puts strain on the kidney cells. So the kidneys, you have different units in the kidney, we call them nephrons, the kidney has different units, and these help to filter, waste from the blood. So the high pressure in the vessels puts pressure on these nephrons, we call them, these cells within the units within the kidney, and then you start having reduction of these nephrons. Maybe you are born with millions of them. Over time, they start to reduce because the blood pressure tends to make them to decline in function, and you start losing those. So your kidney function starts to decline, and it takes time over time, and then eventually it leads to a stage whereby you may even start needing to do dialysis. So that is why it's so having a blood pressure persistently elevated puts a lot of strain on the kidney, and you start having loss of kidney cells, and then over time your kidney function starts to decline, and then over time it leads to kidney failure. Okay. But oftentimes that's why when somebody has hypertension, when we make the diagnosis, we usually screen for all these things, because complications may have started occurring. A lot of times when we detect hypertension, we're not sure when it started. It might have been there for 5 years, 10 years, we're not sure. So usually we screen the person, we check the heart, we check the kidney. So we always check their kidneys to see whether the kidney loss of function has already started, And if we are lucky, maybe it hasn't started, okay, very good. That means we've caught the hypertension early. Over time, it has already gone by 50%. Some other times it will be by 75%. So our time it may be too late. Some people even come with already kidney failure and hypertension together. Maybe we've caught them too late. So that's... and then obviously, so these are the commonest conditions.
Now, you've already spoken to the fact that people don't know, or some live in denial.
Yes.
What's the level of awareness in our environment about the challenge of elevated blood pressure?
Okay, so the level of awareness is quite poor. And oftentimes when we do, screening, if you just go randomly to the public, public space and you screen people, oftentimes, okay, it's thought that about 1 in 3, adults, are hypertensive. And then when you now find out these people who have hypertension, you'll find out that only a third of them actually are aware of their diagnosis, So you could see that. So the majority of people who you just detect to have high blood pressure don't even know they don't. I mean, most people don't routinely check their blood pressure. So the majority of people who we screen on just random screen, not those that come to hospital, because those who we just go to the streets and then you just screen them, you find out that majority of people with hypertension actually are not aware of the condition. And this has been consistent finding all this, and a lot of screening is going on this World Hypertension Day all over the country, spearheaded by many organizations, including the Nigerian Hypertension Society. We are doing communities outreach and screening in all 36 states of the Federation. And it's one of the things that we consistently find each year. You find out that many people that we screen, majority are not actually aware of their condition. And so first of all, people don't even know they have it. And obviously there's also ignorance about, the complications and what can occur. But the most dangerous thing is that many people are not even checking, because if it's a condition that is silent, that doesn't cause symptoms, if you don't look out, if you don't check, you're not going to detect it. So yes, the level of awareness is quite poor, which is why we're having this discussion, so that we hope that after this program, people who have not, if you're not checking BP for several years, well, you go and check it. You should check it from time to time, and that's the only way to actually detect it early.
Absolutely. So the theme of the year is measure your blood pressure accurately, control it, live longer.
Yes.
What's the objective here?
Yeah, so it's very key. So starting with the first phrase, measure your blood pressure accurately. This has been, and this is a repeated theme. Even for several years now, we've had the same thing. Why? Because now there's a paradigm. The old paradigm for blood pressure used to be that, okay, the blood pressure machine is something that you go to hospital to check. You go to the hospital and a doctor checks your blood pressure for you. But now, actually, what we advocate home blood pressure measurement. It's something both for people who don't have hypertension and those who have hypertension who need to monitor themselves. So all patients who are on drugs, who have that diagnosis, we encourage all of them to procure digital blood pressure screening blood pressure machines and to check it frequently. And this is very important because obviously, first of all, your home is your natural environment. Some people, when they come to the hospital, the blood pressure actually goes up. So we're actually very interested. And also, if you're checking it at home, imagine if you're coming, I usually advocate, oftentimes, if they're coming to see the doctor, if the appointment is approaching, we say, okay, maybe check it for 7 days preceding your appointment. That gives the doctor about 7 days readings. So it's more reflective. You have more data to work with. You can get an average rather than just checking it once while in a busy clinic. We've been there waiting for many hours, sweating and tired, and then you check that. So home blood pressure measurement globally now, even recognized by WHO and international bodies, there's a lot of emphasis on home blood pressure measurement. So because of that emphasis, now there's also an emphasis on checking it accurately. Because if you're going to the hospital, the doctor is taking the responsibility or the nurse is checking it and is trained. Now, because we're encouraging people to check their blood pressure themselves, now we have to train people to check it properly. And there are many errors people make, which I would like to go through. So first of all, if you're checking your blood pressure, you need to make sure you have to be seated calmly and relaxed. Your feet, 2 feet on the ground, not, and you should not be tense. You just relax. Your back should be, seated just the way I'm sitting, not inclined forward, because you have to be relaxed. Anything that causes tension in your body can affect your blood pressure.
What if the fellow decides to lie down?
Well, you could lie, but lying down, it's difficult to check it yourself if you're lying down, unless somebody checking it for you. So usually the most convenient thing is to check it, sit down. Yes, since you're the one checking yourself, put it on the table. Have you do it by your table. And a table, because you can put the machine. The machine should also be at the level of your heart. Your machine should not be on your lap, should not be on the floor. The machine has to be at the level of your heart. So just sit down, with probably by your dining table or so, and just the way they check it in the hospital, and put the machine there. The machine should be at the level of your heart. Another thing is that you shouldn't have done any excessive physical activity like exercise, going to the gym, or having, in the preceding 30 minutes. And you shouldn't have done even any activity at all. Like maybe just going to collect the remote of your TV and sitting down. Not even that. You shouldn't have done anything for 5 minutes. You should have been sitting down calmly for at least 5 minutes before checking your blood pressure. So I usually tell people to, okay, maybe while you're watching TV or doing something, just after some time, they interrupt it, check the blood pressure. So you already sit down, you're already relaxed, and then you check your blood pressure. Not when you just come back from work, you're very tired, you just check it immediately, or you come back from, jogging and you check, that's so you have to keep that. And then also we encourage people to check it several times. Don't just check it once, check it like 2 or 3 times. And oftentimes, sometimes the first reading tends to be a bit higher. At times, we may ignore that and just focus on the second and the third reading. And so you take 3 readings at once. And then also make sure you avoid things like smoking or taking coffee also shortly before 30 minutes to 1 hour before checking your blood pressure. And so these are things that people should, and to keep in mind. Of course, there are ways of putting it there. They usually can go through the instructions on where to put the cuff and all that. So, well, these are just some tips that I would like to emphasize. So, because accurate measurements also helps us to know, so that we have readings that are reflective, not readings that are and also just like I said earlier, it's better to check it when you're calm. Don't wait for when I'm feeling pain, or when I have backache, or when I'm feeling sad, when I'm
having a headache.
When I'm having a headache. Those are not the times to check your blood pressure. Check it when you're calm, relaxed, and
Okay.
So that's
Now, just by way of education, what are the causes of elevated blood pressure?
okay. So the causes of
You see, I'm not using the word hypertension. I'm taking your advice.
Okay.
So, what are the causes of elevated blood pressure?
Okay. Well, but I would like to still, elevated blood, but I would still like to answer it as causes of hypertension, because that's really what we are, interested in. Elevated, and now actually, now, so the causes of elevated blood pressure, okay, let me just say, or hypertension, yeah, because elevated blood pressure, to say elevated blood pressure can be caused, anybody can have elevated. If you go on a treadmill, for instance, your blood pressure is going to go up. So that's, activity, physical activity, emotional distress, and so many things that cause elevated blood. But that happens in everybody. What we are really interested in is persistently elevated blood pressure, which is hypertension, and that's what that causes, damage and all that. So this has, is multifactorial. There are multiple causes. But first of all, we have two types of hypertension. The hypertension that most people have is what we call the primary type, or essential hypertension, where it's not due to a particular organ in the body that is damaged, like your kidney or hormonal imbalance. It's just the one that puts us off hypertension, and that's it. So that is usually caused by, we'll call them risk factors, because it's a multiple factors that come together. Sometimes we don't really know. People just have hypertension. It's very common, and you just have hypertension, and we can't really find, a cause. But obviously, there are things that put you at higher risk of having hypertension, and one is genetics for sure. Having a family history. If you're both parents, one of your parents is hypertensive, you have and even much more so if both parents are hypertensive, your risk is even much higher.
So it can be an inheritance.
Yes, there's that predisposition. And of course, that doesn't mean that if your parents are hypertensive, it doesn't mean you will have it. As I said, it's an interplay of multiple factors. It just means that you're at higher risk, and you should be more careful. So that's that. And obviously, also having increase in age, the older you get, that's why hypertension is common in those who are elderly, and then all that. So that's one. And then, but also very importantly is also the lifestyle factors, which is very important. Lifestyle factors. So these are multiple things. Just being obese, for instance, being overweight puts you at higher risk. Dietary indiscretion, having, eating foods, a lot of salt, high salt intake, is also puts you at higher risk. Being, sedentary, lifestyle, smoking, taking excessive alcohol intake. These can also, put you, at higher risk. And even chronic stress also, people who have a very high stressful, condition, not sleeping properly, these can, these together with your genetic predisposition can put you at higher risk of developing hypertension. But also some people also, even without all these risk factors, you can still have it.
You talked about lifestyle choices. You also talked about the kind of things that people eat as being responsible for it. Mm-hmm. A good number of people have talked about salt. Mm-hmm. Help us understand how that works.
Okay. All right. So now salt, because what salt does, salt has a function in the body. What salt, when we have a high, salt intake, it can actually, raise, your blood pressure, and so that is a well-known and documented thing. So therefore, what that now means is that obviously if somebody has that tendency, predisposition to have high blood pressure, and of course you take a lot of very salty food, processed food, and all that, that can contribute to building to your blood pressure being increased. So such that we advocate that if you now moderate your salt intake, that can potentially, one, if you have very mild hypertension, it could even actually reduce the need for you to start medications. In some people who are already taking medications, it can reduce the number of drugs you need to take, or it can make your drugs to work better. Because salt, as a substance, it helps to, it actually salt and water go together. So when you take a lot of salt, then you tend to accumulate more. Your blood volume goes up, and then that also increases your blood pressure. So that is one thing. So we usually we advise people to, to monitor their salt intake. First of all, don't the habit of adding salt to food. Once salt comes in, you start, there's that instinct to just add, So to refrain from that. So we just, avoid adding salt to your food. And then salt can be added, of course, at the point of cooking, but in moderate amounts. We usually will advocate, okay, like a 1 teaspoon of salt, level teaspoon. That should be the salt for the day. It's tough for many people, but that is what has been shown to have, But generally, most people take much more than that, and many times, you take processed food, fast food, you add salt. So there's a lot. So we take a lot of times, much more than this. It takes some time, takes some training, but people, it's just something, an awareness that we want people to be aware. And with time, your taste buds get used to it. So you reduce it, because a lot is a habit from it. Over time, you start reducing. With time, you get used to taking a food with low salt intake.
So when you talked about lifestyle changes that are essential, what are some of these lifestyle changes that are essential? And that's one. Secondly, maybe you want to answer that one, because I want to ask about is it possible to totally reverse the symptoms of hypertension? But what are the to that first question?
Okay, so yes, so the lifestyle things first, for what we're talking about, healthy diets, moderate, to moderate, avoid excessive salt intake, to increase your fruits and vegetables in your diet, because these are rich in potassium, and potassium helps to actually lower blood pressure. We want people to also, of course, avoid excessive taking refined sugars, and of course avoid smoking. And to reduce that, if you don't take alcohol, of course, avoid it. If alcohol is very important for you, then in moderate amounts. So these are, and then to be active, very important. Many people, especially now, of course, post-COVID, a lot of people now work from home. They start, and then so people should keep that in mind, especially those who work from home, those who have sedentary jobs, that they need to stay active, take breaks, go around, walk around. And I think actually, because of this, coming this morning on Saturday mornings in many environments, I actually see a lot of people, doing workouts. The gyms are springing up and down. So I think this culture is actually increasing, and I think we need to encourage it more. But but this is for everybody, because probably those who are a bit more affluent, a bit more enlightened, are the ones that tend to do this more. But I think even those who have low socioeconomic means, we have to enlighten them that they also need to, not just somebody's a roadside petty trader, can be there sitting the whole day just selling things and not doing so. Everybody needs to be active, avoid that sedentariness, and to take breaks. To for instance, if one is coming back from work, maybe stop 1 or 2 bus stops before and then trek back. Those are inventive means. Even if you are very busy, you can always find time to to have that to walk. So we also advise exercise is also very good. All forms of exercise are quite different forms of exercise are helpful. Walking, jogging, swimming, playing football. And then some people, okay, they can't really engage in sports and all. Okay, fine, brisk walking. Doing that at least 30 minutes every day for 5 days in a week, for instance. 150 minutes in a week. That is what the WHO recommended exercise that helps to for cardiovascular health, and to also to delay to help to controlling blood pressure. So these are things. So I would say eat well, be active, and avoid indiscreet and avoid harmful things like smoking, alcohol, and excessive alcohol intake. These are the things that are advocated. And then for the reversal, you said,
okay. How about water intake? How does it have any effect?
Well, no, I think people should just drink enough water. Don't be dehydrated. Avoid dehydration, or take water. I've known people there are many things you see online. Where you take water in the morning, take water in the night, take water, wake up. Well, these things, I don't think we have clear science. Well, that's not my area. I practice orthodox medicine. But I would say, look, people should just drink enough water and don't avoid dehydration. I think that's more important. Whether it's cold or warm or whatever, take whatever water you like, but avoid dehydration. Take enough water and all that.
Okay. The reversal. Is it possible for someone to say, okay, after all these things that you have advised me to do, I can get to a point where I never take blood pressure medications again?
I would say for majority of people, hypertension is a lifelong affair. So I'll just be frank about that. Now, some people who have mild hypertension, by mild hypertension, I mean just their blood pressure is just mildly elevated, maybe just slightly above, at 140/90, just very mild hypertension. For those sort of people, yes, they could, with lifestyle measures only, because lifestyle measures don't dramatically reduce blood pressure. They only reduce it by a few, millimeters of mercury by in limited amounts. So if your blood pressure is mild, you could actually convert it from being mild hypertensive to a normal blood pressure just with lifestyle, measures alone, and keep it like that. That is possible. But in those people who have moderate to severe hypertension, most of the time you need medications plus lifestyle to actually get it under control. And for such people, they need to be on medications for many people, really for the rest of their lives. And people should just know this, because why it's difficult for people to take drugs when they're not when they're not having symptoms. The reason is because we don't want to have renal failure, we don't want to have kidney failure, heart attack, stroke. That's why you're taking those medications. So that's why I usually counsel people that look, just to understand the reason is not to solve that headache that you think is causing your BP. It's not to make you feel better. No, it's to make you avoid the complications of hypertension. So when people are educated and they understand this, then it helps, because sometimes they feel medicine should be taken for illness. I should take drugs when I'm feeling, but I don't have any. Why should I be taking medication? It's because we don't want to have the complications of hypertension. That's why you're on medication. So I would say for some people, it could be kept under control without medication. But for the vast majority of people, it can be managed, treated, and once you can, with drugs and lifestyle, with medications and lifestyle, and keeping it within the control range, you can have a life expectancy like a normal person, like the rest of the population without hypertension. That's what we want to achieve. And so that's what we want to enlighten people. And people should be encouraged that so millions of people all over the world are hypertensive, and they're also taking. So you're not the only one. Some people think that it's like as if they have cancer. When you say a hypertension diagnosis is like no. People should realize that it's a condition. It's not a cancer. It's not you're a normal person. It's just that we're trying to prevent you. You have a risk factor that can lead to damage in the future, and we're trying to control it. So people should be encouraged and not feel bad that they have hypertension.
Okay, is it also a concern among young people? Okay, maybe the way to put it would be, are young people also at risk? I hear now that we have young people who are depressed as young as 10. I'm wondering, are you paying school fees? So is it something that young people should also be concerned about?
Yes, because we are seeing an increasing amount of young people coming down with hypertension. Now, of course, first of all, even before now, hypertension is something that can occur at any age, even in children. And in children, it tends to due to the secondary type. When they have problems with a congenital, a defect in their organ systems, they can have high blood pressure. But even the hypertension that I told, there is a common that usually occurs in adulthood, the primary hypertension. We're even beginning to see this even in younger people in their 20s, even their late teens, early 20s,
having high blood pressure.
Having high blood pressure. It's coming because these lifestyle changes, as I said, is now, people are, of course, a lot of fast food, a lot of obesity is also on the rise. And so these lifestyle indiscretions are rising. And when that rises in the population, then it starts and we'll start having high blood pressure at a younger age. And of course, if their parents are also hypertensive, and a lot of times people who have both parents being hypertensive, you can also have it at an earlier age than expected. So a lot of times people in their 20s, because both of their parents are hypertensive, this can also, and also with lifestyle indiscretion, they can develop hypertension. So we are seeing increasing amounts, and it's a global thing. And also in Nigeria, in this environment, we are seeing younger people because of obesity on the rise, because of dietary indiscretion, because of these things. So we are seeing so young people should also be on the lookout. And that's why we're having this. So with education, people should realize that it's not just something you shouldn't wait till you're 60 years old before you start checking your blood pressure. You should actually start on time.
We have to thank you so much for your time this morning. Dr. Oyewole Kushimo is a consultant cardiologist, Lagos University Teaching Hospital, and also Lagos State Coordinator, Nigerian Hypertension Society, talking to us on World Hypertension Day about measuring your blood pressure accurately, controlling it, in order for you to live longer. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Truly appreciate it.